Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Getting Started with SEDS, Related Service Provision 101. We are glad you've joined us here today. Before we get started, let's do a quick sound check. Please type in the chat box, in the question chat box, if you can hear us right now. Again, please type in the question chat box if you can hear us right now. Great, glad everyone can hear. My name is Annette Thacker-Bartlett, and I will be assisting and answering questions throughout today's webinar. I'm also joined by Ms. Yvonne Smith from the non-public team, who will assist in answering questions, as well as Ms. Sharon Powell from the non-public team. On the data side, we have Ms. Rita Larkins, who will be our training presenter today. Today is a demonstration training where we are going to show you, by modeling and demonstrating for you, how to use the SEDS system if you are a related service provider. So let's just get to our agenda. Today we don't actually have a PowerPoint presentation. Today is demonstration training. Rita is going to be in the system showing you around all the things that you would do if you are a related service provider. Whether you're a speech pathologist or a social worker, anyone who delivers services and logs them in SEDS, this webinar is for you. Now, throughout today, questions will pop up that have more to do on the policy or the compliance sides of things. In particular, possibly with missed services or when you have to document things. Please, when you do have questions that pop up, whether it's about using the SEDS system or whether it's a policy question, type those questions in as you go along in your question chat box, and we will do our best to address them throughout the webinar, and we will stay on the line after the webinar to continue asking questions for a few minutes as well. Here's what we're going to talk about today. First, how to set up your caseload, or to make sure that your caseload has been set up correctly by somebody else. And then we're going to show you how to actually log a service. Those of you that are service providers, most of you probably have had lots of experience creating service logs in the past. However, we want to make sure today that we go over all of the different types of situations in which you would log a service and make sure that you fill it out correctly. Having an incorrect service log can lead to a lot of frustration later down the line in many ways. So, for example, having a service log that is incorrect can affect Medicaid payments and billing and reimbursement. It can affect non-public payments. It can affect compliance for a student who sees that they're getting the services they are supposed to be. And it can affect you and your performance evaluation as well if someone at your school is overseeing services and they don't see the correct record of service delivered. Many reasons to get it right. And so we're going to go with you over today with the nitty-gritty. And as a reminder, if you deliver a service, you need to log that service within 5 business days of when that service has been provided in the SEDS system. That's the service log. And that should be you should have a log for every service session you have delivered for each student in that session. Also, we often see people forgetting to log missed services. If a session was scheduled and should have occurred but did not occur for a variety of reasons, it could be on the student or on the provider, you need to still create a log to document that that service was missed. And we'll show you an example of that later. Additionally, if you do a makeup service, you need to create another log and indicate that it's a makeup service. And we'll talk more about those as we get through the webinar, but we just want to remind you up front of those expectations of documenting. Another area of confusion that we often see is in service trackers. A service log is different than a service tracker. A service log is where you actually input notes and information about the service, what happened during that service session. A service tracker is a legal document that is generated. It's a PDF document that is generated that serves as evidence that, of the services that were provided over a period of time. So please pay attention today the differences between a service log and a service tracker. Service trackers also are very important to generate because the OSSE non-public billing and payments team, as well as Medicaid teams, they look at those service trackers, those PDF documents. They do not have the ability to drill down and see every single service log that you create. Rather, some teams at OSSE are looking just at the service tracker, which is more of a summary document of multiple logs put together to make sure that they can pay for non-public services, Medicaid, and things like that. So both of these steps are very important. I'm going to turn the time over to Rita to get started with the actual training demonstration. But before that, we're going to hear a word from Yvonne Smith with our non-publics team to also add just a little bit of context to why we are providing this training today.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Yvonne Smith. I'm the manager of the non-public payment team and the Medicaid recovery team here at OSSE. Again, we just want to reinforce for all of you that we're conducting this session because everybody is having trouble or not understanding the proper way to input service logs and service trackers. So we have both LEAs on the line and non-public schools. So this is especially important to both entities because this is a compliance item and everybody's required to do it. But we wanted to just highlight for non-public schools, starting in January, service trackers and payment for related services are going to be linked together. What that means is that you should not bill OSSE for any related service session that you conducted if you have not put a service tracker into SEDS. So again, if you follow the rules by documenting the log and producing the service tracker within the designated timelines, by the time you're ready to create your invoice and submit it to OSSE, you should only submit related service fees for those trackers that you have created in SEDS. And you all should have received several notices from my team. By now, you should have received 2 notices to alert you to this new item for payment. So it is utterly important that the non-public schools enter service trackers, not just the logs, but you've got to complete the task to issue the service tracker as well so that you will be paid for the services. If you have any questions on that, and again, I've sent you emails with that documentation, feel free to contact me at any time for any more details. So we're going to hand it over to the SEDS team, Rita, and we will start the demonstration.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, good afternoon, everyone. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to move over to SEDS so that we can get started with this portion of the training today. And just one second, let me get all logged in here. Okay. 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 All right, you should be able to hear me loud and clear. Yep. Okay, so we were going through the caseload setup and how a provider is able to add students to their own caseload. So what we did, just to recap, I'm going to go back. We clicked on the Wizards tab, and then we click on Caseload Setup Wizard. This allows you to view what you already have on your caseload. You can scroll to the bottom of the page, and it allows you to add more students to your caseload. So when you click the Add More Students to Caseload button, again, you get the search window, so you are able to search for students associated with that LEA. So I'm going to pull up a student. Trisha Train, that's my student. I can already see who Trisha's case manager is. You can see that from the list, SPED Teacher 4. The other thing that you are able to see when you're setting up the caseload through Caseload Wizard is that you're able to see the services that are associated with that student. Typically, you will only be added to a student's IEP if you are a related service provider, if that student is, the IEP team, if that student is receiving that service. So what you can see in the far right-hand corner are the services that are listed for the different students on the list. So to add yourself as a team member for any of these students, you'll simply click the team member checkbox, scroll to the bottom of your page, if you have a long list like me, and then you simply click Add Student to Caseload. Once you do that, that student is now on your caseload list, and you can begin providing services for them. I'm going to pause right now to take any questions that you might have on using the Caseload Setup Wizard or how to identify students on your caseload. So if you have specific questions about that, go ahead and enter them in the chat window at this time. So the question, we're going to take this question. What if you are searching for a student and it does not appear on that list? So what you need to know about this is that students that are associated with that LEA, the student has followed all the proper registration channels and is a student in that LEA SIS, they typically will appear in SEDS. If there is a student that you are expecting to be in SEDS that is not there, I would advise you to contact the special ed POC for that LEA. Perhaps there's an enrollment issue that they need to resolve, which is why that student does not appear in SEDS. If you're searching for a student and they do not appear on the list of available students for you to add to the caseload, that student may not have that service that you offer on their IEP. So you're only able to add students for services that you offer. Is everybody clear on that? Okay. We want to take another question? Okay. Great. So the question is, if a provider is able to document services for a student that is not on their, that they're not a part of the IEP team, and the answer is no. No, they're not as the assigned provider. Okay, so the question is the provider is on the IEP team, but is not the assigned provider. And before I answer that, I want to just make sure that everybody understands what the assigned provider means. The assigned provider means that you have been updated for this school year as the official person that will be providing services for that student. And I want to just move over to a student so I can show you where that lives. So how can you tell if you're the assigned provider for a student?
let me show you that. Okay, so I am now in the Services and Supplemental Aid section in SEDS. And what you will notice over on the right when you get into the Special Ed and Related Services, there's a drop-down list for the provider. So all providers are listed next to the service that they're going to provide. The Special Ed POC at the LEA will do what is called the update provider at the start of the school year. So the provider may change from year to year. The Special Ed POC will go in and do the update provider. So now you are the official provider of record, and now you are able to log services for that student. One at a time. And, oh, the question, sorry. No, I'm on the computer. No. So multiple providers cannot be assigned to a student. The idea here is that if a student is receiving behavioral support services, there is one provider at the school that is providing that, or one provider for that LEA that's providing that service. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the wizards, go back to that caseload setup wizard, scroll to the bottom. Now, after you have added all of the students on your caseload, this becomes your official caseload. If you need to remove yourself from the caseload, first I would start with, of course, you want to check with the POC for that LEA, to make sure that that is appropriate for you to remove yourself from the caseload. But to remove yourself, you can simply uncheck yourself as a team member, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click Update the Database. And you will get a confirmation message that says, do you want to remove this student, Adele? You'll see the student's name listed. Do you want to remove this student from the caseload? And if you do, you'll go ahead and say yes. If this was a mistake, you can say no, do not remove the student. So to remove the student, I'm going to go ahead and click yes. Now, Adele no longer appears on my caseload. All right, so just to recap in this section, related service providers can set up their caseload if they know which students should be on the caseload. And also, the contact, your LEA POC, is able to set up a caseload for you. Okay. All right, so that's caseload setup. Let's get into the big topic for today, which is the service logging. And that's really one of the most important functions that you'll do in SEDS regarding your wizards. So for this section, you'll go right back to the Wizards tab, and you will notice you have a couple of different wizards available to you. Now, we will go back through the other ones, but the first one I want to talk about is the Service Logging Wizard. And you will notice that there are two Service Logging Wizards listed. The first says, specific to this scenario, Speech Language Pathology Logging Wizard. That is for you to log individual students. In the Speech Language Pathology Group Logging Wizard, you must log services for a group. So if you use that option and you're trying to log services for an individual, just one student, it's going to tell you that you must log for a group if you use that wizard. So the advice here for you guys is to use the speech language or whatever your discipline, the logging wizard, the individual one. I'm going to go ahead and click that. Click it again. All right. So now that we have gone into the logging wizard, the first thing that you will see is all of those students that were on our caseload when we were doing the caseload setup. You will see all of those students listed on the page. A couple of things that I want you to pay attention to because they are very important. I'm going to look at this first student. We're looking at Wendy Berry. And don't worry, these are all training students, so you're not viewing any actual student information. But what I want to point your attention to is that there are two instances for speech language for this student. The first one, if you'll notice the dates of service, so we can assume that this is, not assume, but we know that this is within this school year. The expiration on the IEP, it'll give you the begin and end dates, is 6/20/2018. This is the regular school year service logging. The one right below that, and you'll notice in parentheses, it says ESY. If it is not ESY, if your school is not in the ESY phase, and I know some of us have extended programs that are connected to the school year, but if you are not in the ESY time frame of the year, please do not use the ESY logging wizard. This actually puts your information in two different places. So you want to make sure you're using the correct instance of the student service. Now, on this page, if I wanted to log services for all of the students on my caseload, I could do that at one time, or I can log for just one individual student. And I want to show you the difference in what that looks like. So what I'm going to do is check none, which deselects all the students from my caseload and lets me just select the one student or service that I want to log for. When you scroll to the bottom of the page, it will give you a continue button, and that's going to take you into the actual logging page. So let's do that. I'm going to click continue. And what we see now is the add new service log entry. It is important for you to pay attention to the details on this page. There have been instances where providers have logged services for the incorrect student. If that happens, and it does happen sometimes, it will require you to do a service log deletion request. I want you to pay attention to the details on the page so you don't have that error as often. So for the first section, we see directly from the IEP, we see the IEP begin and end dates. And if you go a little further into the smaller print on that screen, it's going to show you the provider of record, right? Who's the assigned provider for the student. It also shows you the location of services, whether that is inside or outside of general ed setting. And very important here, it shows us whether or not parental consent to bill for Medicaid is on file. So you will also see that right on the logging entry window. And then at the bottom, again, it's going to show you the IEP begin and end dates. Starting from left to right, let's walk through the fields on the new service log entry page. The very first thing that we want to know, very intuitive, right? What was the date of service? What date did you actually provide the service? Okay, so you'll enter a date and you can click the calendar. We see that this is a required field. It has a little asterisk beside it. And this is also critically important. Is this a makeup service? If you are making up a service, you want to make sure that you are clicking that makeup service box. Once you click the box for a makeup service, it wants to know, the system wants to know what was the original date that you were supposed to have the service. So this will allow you to go ahead and enter that original date. I was supposed to see the student on the 25th, but I didn't see him until the 26th, okay? You will enter the duration of service. Now, one thing I want to mention in this section, if this was a missed service and you were supposed to see that student for 60 minutes, but you missed that service, you should never, under any circumstance, enter 0 as your duration of service. Want to make sure we're clear. You should never, under any circumstance, enter 0 as a duration of service, okay? So you enter the actual time that you spent with that student in this, I'm sorry, yeah, would have spent, right? So I'm going to enter 60 minutes because this is our makeup service, right? I'm going to enter the 60 minutes. And then the next thing that you have to do is comment on the progress. So the drop-down arrow gives you the progress statuses, and you will choose one. I'm going to say for this example, the student is maintaining. And then you'll also have to put in some comments. So you can put in the comments, and I believe that some LEAs have some specific guidance for you as to how they want those comments entered. You can definitely confirm and check with them. But one thing we advise folks to do is that if it's a makeup service, you can also type that in the comment box. This is a makeup service. Okay? Going back to the top of the screen, under the service type, there is a drop-down for the service type. Direct service means exactly what you think it means. You directly provided that service to the student. Okay? Next option is a consultation. Did you have a consultation with the student or the parent? You can list that. Your next few options, which are really important, are student absent, student unavailable, and provider unavailable. For some of these options, and I'm going to tell you which ones, you're required to make up that service. As you would think, as you would imagine, if the provider is unavailable, you're always required to make up that service, right? You have student absent, so you can document if the student is absent, or student unavailable. A lot of folks ask the question, what is the difference between student absent and student unavailable? Student absent, basically, the child is not at school today, right? He's absent. But if the student, for some reason, does not want to come to the session, that's a student unavailable. And I would also add in the comment section more information about the student being unavailable or absent. I'm going to pause for a second here and take any questions that you may have before we move forward with this page. So go ahead and type your questions into the chat box at this time. Okay, so a very, very good question about when to use the individual and the group logging wizard. And I want to show you just a few things that may not be just well known, right? I'm going to go back to the wizard. I didn't log that service. I didn't complete the service. I'm going to go back to the logging wizard. Well, let me start here at the group logging, because the question was, can you log for a group, or do you have to log it as individual? The default when you log into the group logging wizard is that it's selecting everything and it's looking for your group. If you have saved groups, you can actually pull down those groups from the drop down, and it's going to change the students that are selected on your screen. Let me demonstrate. I'm going to select the Thursday group, and you will notice that the check boxes have now changed. So only students that I placed in the Thursday group now have a checkbox next to their name, which means they're ready for me to log a service. If I scroll down and I click continue, look at what happens to my screen. It now says that I have a Thursday group with 4 students. It allows me to log the service for the first student, and then it will allow me to move to the next student. So that's the difference between the individual and the group logging wizard. Now, another thing that's really important here is that even though you see this in the drop-down 1, how often have you had a group of 1? I hope never. So you should not use 1, even though SEDS allows you to do that. You should not use 1 as your group size. We already know your size up here is 4, okay? It should be an error, but it is not. I'm telling you because I know that you all want to make sure your documentation is as accurate as possible. So I'll go back to the wizard. Oh, are we taking another question? Oh, cut and paste comments?
Yeah.
You can cut and paste comments. So the question was, are we able to cut and paste comments? You can, from a technical perspective, you can do that. I would caution users when times folks will copy and paste and leave student A's name and put those notes in student B's logging. So it is very important that, you know, you are reading this information. Even if it's a copy and paste, ultimately the accuracy of the information is the responsibility of the provider.
And not every student will be performing the same in a group setting. It makes sense to copy and paste if you're providing a little bit of background about what you did with the student or the, you know, the setting, things like that. But then definitely make sure to individualize it for that student, because you're creating a log just for that student to track that student, even though you're using a group logging wizard.
Right. So I want to show you the error that's going to come up, even though you wouldn't think it's an error. So I'm going to deselect everyone. Well, hold on a second. I'm going to go back to the logging, to the group logging wizard, and I'm going to deselect everyone. Check none. And I'm going to only check Wendy. Notice I only have the one student checked, but I'm under the group logging wizard. When I click continue, you will get an error that says you must select the, for more than one student. That's when you use the group logging wizard. Okay, so it's not going to let you log under the group logging wizard for just one student. Mm-hmm. About this?
About one student,
Mm-hmm.
students with multiple LEAs
Mm-hmm.
in a group.
Mm-hmm.
So we did get a good question. That when you create the log, you document that it was a group session by selecting the number of participants on that log, and in the notes section, in that comment section, it's very important that you write a little note in the comments box. So you can see right here under group size, I can still choose a group size even when I'm using the individual logging session. And you never have to use a group logging wizard if you don't want to. It's just there to make your life easier. But if you like going and doing logs one by one, not connected to each other, not in a batch form, you can do that too. That's great. What really matters at the end of the day, doesn't matter which wizard you use at the end of the day, what matters is what you put on this page right here. This is the official document that is going to get pulled into your related services management report. This gets pulled onto the service tracker. If you're logging for a group, but you only have one DCPS student in that group, you're doing an individual log in SEDS, but you're noting that is a group with a group size number, and in the comments you're saying this was a group session with students from other LEAs. Then when Yvonne's team was looking at that for a non-public payment or for Medicaid, they can see on the service tracker, which we're going to talk about later, they can see on that tracker document these same notes that you typed in right here. It's very easy to say, oh yeah, it's a group logging session. Right. Group size.
And so to the point that she was going through in terms of whether you're going to log an individual or a group, I want to point your attention to the very top of this page. Even though I'm selecting individual students, because I selected everyone at the same time, and I have 23 students on this caseload, it's going to let me move through the list of students. So I would log for Wendy, student 1 of 23, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. So we actually have a created log. I'm going to log for that student. I'm going to make this a delivered service for 60 minutes. Student is maintaining. Okay? Then I'll put the service type in as a direct service. The group size, I saw her by herself, just this one student. In the next section, under the areas covered or assessed during your session, you will select whatever was covered or what you did with the student during that session. So you'll select that, and then you can click Update the Database. Okay. Or skip this service. Now, if I skip this service, it will take me to the next student that's in the list.
All right, this is just a tip. In the space where you put in your comment, Rita put in just a general comment, but we actually need you to have a little bit more substance in there. So to say that a student is, so it would be good to say, and this is what kind of provider speech?
This is speech, yeah.
Okay, to say that today Johnny worked on X, Y, Z, and it's progressing or will need more of this. You know, it doesn't have to be a book, but it should have a little more information than the student is progressing or the student is maintaining or whatever. So if you could just put any specific task that you were working on that day, and like I said, it can be just a couple of sentences or one good sentence with enough information.
And then the other thing that we do ask that folks put in this comments box is whether it's a makeup service, right? Okay. So I have entered the information for this particular student. I'm going to go down to the bottom of the screen and click Update the Database. This is actually going to log that service for the student. But there are a couple of things that you as a provider need to be aware of, okay? SEDS gives you an opportunity to verify that you have entered the correct information before you log the service. So you'll see the warning on the screen that a direct service for 60 minutes was logged by me, RSP provider 10, for the student and the date. It's asking you to confirm that you have checked this warning and you're confirming that this log should be created for the student. That's done by simply checking the box. I would advise folks that are tuned into this training today, do not just check the box. Actually check to make sure that you have logged the correct service for the correct student. Because that's going to lead to another part of what we're going to talk about today is requesting deletion of service logs, okay? So once you have confirmed that this is correct, a couple of things that the system will allow you to do. You can say, yes, log this service, and then allow me to log another instance for the same student. So you may log a service that was delivered, and you may be logging a service that was missed for the same student. So this option, log and allow me to enter another instance, is when you have to do more than one log for the same student. The next option is no, I made a mistake. It wasn't 60 minutes. It was actually 45 minutes, and I need to go back and make a correction. In that instance, you will check no, allow me to correct the information. Once you click that, it lets you go back. And now I can put in the actual 45 minutes that should have been there and click Update the Database. Again, you will get the same warning to make sure that the information is correct. Once you are satisfied with the information you've entered on the screen, you can go ahead and click Yes, log this service. See what I mean? When you don't check the box.
She did that on purpose.
Yeah, that was on purpose. When you don't check the box, you will get that error message. So I'm going to go ahead and log the service. Look at the top of the screen. Look what happened. It went to the next instance for the student. So remember I said you want to make sure you uncheck those ESY listings of the student service. If not, it will come up if you're trying to log all of the students at one time. Okay? So that's what we need to do to actually enter service logs into the system. Now, I'm going to pause for this section and take a few questions about those service logs that you have entered and saved.
Difference between caseload members and providers. Are those two, are there two?
Not really. So the question is, what is the difference between a related service provider and a case member or case member? So everyone is considered a case member. If you are on the student's IEP team, you are an IEP team member. You're a part of that caseload. The related service provider, as you all know, are the folks that are a part of the team that are actually providing the services that the team has decided that the student is going to require. So that's the main difference. If you're the related service provider, you absolutely can be a team member, even though your official role in the system, your role on the team is to provide services. Does that make sense? I know you're saying yes in the background, I just can't hear you. So we're going to move on with another question. Did you have another one about?
Did we talk about missed services already?
Mm-hmm.
About when to make them up?
We should talk a little bit more about that.
We
So,
can wait a little bit.
hmm?
You can wait.
Talk about missed services. This is a good time.
Missed services. Okay, we have gotten a few because we are talking about creating logs. Some of you had great questions about missed service. Some of you have great questions about missed services. You want to know when you have to make up those services. You want to know, if you have to make up those services, when do you have to create a log, not create a log. So let's talk through a couple examples on that. So let's do the very classic example of the student is absent and you're not able to provide the service. If it's a school day and the service was scheduled to occur and the student did not show up, either because they were absent or for some other reason they were unable to receive the service, either way, it's a missed service because it was supposed to happen and it did not. In that case, you would create a log. You would come here and create a log. The service type is going to be either student absent or student unavailable. Again, this is a situation where it's the student's fault that the service was not provided. We'll talk about when the provider is unavailable in just a few minutes. But for now, let's say it was a student who is out sick. So the student was absent. Notice how that pre-populated the service delivery type to be attempted. Some of you have questions about when is it attempted or not attempted. When you're logging a missed service, if it's the student's fault that the service was missed, I shouldn't say fault, that's a strong word, I take that back. If it is the student being unavailable or absent, if that is the reason why the service was missed, but the provider was there, ready to make it happen, you put attempted. If it was the provider who was unavailable, and that's why the service was missed, then you put not attempted, because in that case, the provider is not available. So the service delivery, whether you put attempted or not attempted, depends on whether it was the provider unavailable or the student unavailable or absent. Either way, what you're logging is the missed service. I'm going to put 30 minutes. This is such a common mistake. People put 0 minutes. I can see your point. Logically, you think, oh, well, the service was missed, therefore 0 minutes were delivered. That's true, that 0 minutes were delivered, but you're not logging what's delivered. This is a missed service log. You're logging the minutes that were missed. So I'm going to put 30 minutes as missed because the provider is unavailable. And I can put in the notes here, always put in the notes, like provider out sick, unexpectedly. Just, put a reason there why the service is missed, because that's going to help you, it's going to help your supervisor, it's going to help OSSE, the more information you can provide, because these service categories aren't that specific, they're more general. Now, this is for a missed service, and you put the date that it was supposed to have happened, that it was scheduled, and you save this log. So now you have 30 minutes on the books as a missed service. It's not counting towards your delivered rate, it's counting in a separate category of missed minutes, but it's still important to have this documentation. Then let's say the next week, the provider got over their cold, they're back at work, and they're going to do a makeup session. Well, in OSSE at the state level, we have policy that talks about missed services in our related services policy. And at the state level, we have certain rules, certain expectations. And at the state level, the policy is if the student misses the service because the provider was unavailable, then you are required to make it up. So the next week, I'm going to make it up, hypothetically. So then when I go to do the date of the makeup, I'm going to check this box. This is a makeup service. And when I check that box, it lets me put in the date that it was originally scheduled. So then I'm going to put the date that it was originally scheduled. Now both of these go in the record, and that's extremely helpful for the future. And now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, wait, now there's 2 logs for the same service. There's only one session that happened, but there's 2 separate logs. That's okay, because one of the logs is documenting 30 minutes of a missed service, and the other log is documenting 30 minutes of delivered as a makeup service. And so that's okay. Now, when it's a school closure, we always get people who ask, do I need to log services over a holiday break, over spring break, because they're missing their services? No. If it was not scheduled, you should never have services scheduled to happen when it's not a school day, unless it's a very extreme case of ESY where they need those, but that's a different story. For the most part, your students, you're not supposed to be delivering sessions when school's not in session over those 2 weeks in December, for example. So you do not need to go create a bunch of missed service logs because the school was closed in December for the holidays. That's because it never should have happened anyway. It's a holiday. It's not the expectation. On the service was when there's a snow day or a fire or something unexpected where the service was scheduled and it was supposed to happen and then it unexpectedly did not happen. In that case, that is a missed service that you're going to want to log. So hopefully that helps clear up when you have to log a missed service and when you don't. For makeup services, when the student was unavailable or absent, whether or not you have to make up those services, it depends. OSSE's policy that is denying them FAPE is leading to a denial of FAPE, then you need to make it up. Now, your organization, as a non-public or an LEA, you need to have your own internal, LEAs are supposed to have their own internal policies about when you make up missed services and when you don't. There's all kinds of situations. There's half-day professional developments. The students get dismissed early. There's snow days. There's days when Johnny leaves school early to go to the doctor and he misses his service. There's field trips. There's like different schedule changes, assemblies. There's so many different things that can happen. We can't possibly spell out all the details of when you should and should not make up a service. It's the principle that applies of whether or not missing this service is leading to a denial of FAPE. Consider a student who is scheduled to get speech every Monday afternoon, and then for several Mondays in a row, they've had to leave school early for a family thing. Well, that's a pattern of missing sessions many Mondays in a row. Are you just going to keep logging missed services on a Monday, or are you going to think, wait a minute, let's change the day that it's scheduled to fix that? So just applying the principle of, is the student receiving FAPE or not? And again, if you're non-public, you need to reach out to each LEA for which you have students that you serve and say, hey, can we get a copy of your missed services policy? Because every LEA needs to have their own. They might have their own additional requirements. Some LEAs say, if it was a missed service, we're going to make it up no matter. Okay. We just had a technical difficulty. If you can hear me okay, please type in the chat box. You probably can't see your screen right now, and that's okay. We're going to get back online in one instance, but in the meantime, I'm going to keep talking about these policy issues while Rita gets her computer back online. And that's correct. You can't see anything right now. So while we're waiting for Rita to get her screen back up, I'm going to take you on a field trip. So let me just show you my screen. Okay, here we are, OSSE web.dc.gov. Now, by the way, we're giving the OSSE website a complete website. Let me just show you right now a good resource page. I'm going to show you where to go find the policies on special education and also where to find reporting of this training. So I'm on the OSSE homepage. I'm going to go to Programs. Under Programs, I go to Data. This is the data slow today. And once I get to the data page, I'm going to scroll down, and we'll email you this. I'll put this direct link in here. Here you will.
All right. Oh, sharing. I have to make it again for that. The possible. How did you log in?
I don't know.
Who are you logged in as?
Me.
I don't see Rita. I don't see you logged in as a. Did you use the link to be a cohort user?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this one. Okay. I should be switching it over. Yes. Change. Quick change presenter. What is this? Oh, there we go. There we go.
Okay. So now we have logged our service. Oh, I did that. I like the echo effect. Okay. So we've logged the service, and now you are the only person that knows that the service has been logged. How does everybody else find out that you've actually completed service logging? This is where we can go into a couple of different places. But what you're required to do, so that folks know that you have logged your service, you're required to create a service tracker. I'd like for you to think of the difference between service logging and the service tracker. Think of the service logging as a verb. Service logging means that there is actually action that you have to take in order to enter the information in the system. The service tracker, and I'm going to go there, the service tracker is actually something that you produce, right? It's an actual document that shows the services that you have logged. So, back to the wizards. You'll go to the service tracker, and the service tracker, this is wonderful. As soon as you pull it up, it's going to let you create logs a service tracker for the students that are on your caseload. So you'll see all of the students listed, and you can click continue to do them all at one time, or as we just showed you, you can do individuals. So I'm going to click continue. At the top of your screen, please make sure that you are selecting the school year and not ESY. You can enter the date range. Folks are supposed to be creating the service logs at least one time per month. The service tracker, I'm sorry. So they're entering the information in the service logging. Your service logging, just to refresh everyone as to this requirement, should be done within 5 days of completing the actual service. But your service tracker should be done at least monthly. And so what this does is giving you all the students that you have created service logs for, and it lets you create a tracker for each individual student. I'm going to choose this time frame. Actually, I can choose it for the month, but I'm just going to choose today because I know I log services for today. And the area was speech. So you can create a draft or you can create a final. The draft is going to allow you to take a look at it before you make a final document. Okay? When you create the final document, you can come up to My Docs, and then you can see the documents that you just created, and it'll also show you the students that are associated with those service trackers. So I'm going to click on that first one, just for anyone that has never seen the actual service tracker. This is what it looks like. It breaks down all of the information for the student that we already discussed, the IP, end date, all of their demographic information will be at the top of the page. And then you will see the IP information, and then below that, the services that you have logged for that student in the time frame in which you generated this report. Now, let's talk about another important thing regarding the service tracker. If you are unlicensed and you are interning or working under a licensed clinician,
As an assistant.
yes, an assistant, yeah, you will need to actually print the service tracker and sign the service tracker. Yeah. And then also have a supervisor. See at the bottom where it says supervisor signature? You can have the supervisor, the person that is supervising you, to sign off on the service tracker. And we're going to take a little pause right here to answer some questions that you may have, because I think there are questions in this section. Anything?
So I'm just sending a link to everybody to the OSSE policy. And if you look on page 10, and you can read this later because we're going to keep things moving here in the webinar. On page 10, you can go read about what I was explaining about when you have to make up a missed service when the student was absent, and when you have to make it up when the provider was unavailable, and talking about FAPE and those types of things. It also says explicitly in that policy that LEAs need to have their own related services policies and procedures as well. So if you are a non-public, it's important that you have a copy of each LEA's missed services policy or related services policy, which touches on missed services, to make sure you're following what that LEA asks, in addition to whatever minimum requirements OSSE sets according to our policy. You can see is citing a lot from the IDEA federal laws and the local special ed laws. So we have questions about people asking, can unlicensed providers actually give the services as long as someone is supervising them? So those questions are a little tricky. We can't, here at OSSE, we can't say explicitly in every situation like who should be giving the service and who should not. That looks different for every student, and of course you have to follow any applicable laws and regulations. But we do know there exist situations where there's interns or assistants that provide the services and who log the services. And in those cases, we're saying for OSSE purposes, if it's not the fully licensed provider doing the log, we definitely need to see that supervisor's signature on the tracker on our end. But as far as like a general rule about who can provide service and who cannot, it's too nuanced to say specifically who can do that. There's a lot of considerations there that at least I'm not equipped to answer that question. I'm thinking I'm in here. And then some people are asking about, so a service tracker, as you can see here, a service tracker is a PDF document. The service log was the data entry page in SEDS. This is just a PDF document. There's no data entry on a service tracker. All you're doing is generating a service tracker, which means creating this PDF document, which is now a permanent part of the student's files in SEDS. Several years ago, OSSE did have the requirement that you had, even if you were a fully licensed provider, we made you print this off, sign it, fax it back into SEDS for every single student. And it was really a lot of fun. Just kidding. Several years ago, OSSE came out with the official statement saying just generating the service tracker within your SEDS account constitutes an electronic signature, where essentially you generating it is saying, putting your electronic signature stamp on it, saying, yes, I verify I gave these services. That's because you're logged into your secure account with your password, generating this document, so it's safe for OSSE to assume that you are the one that generated this document and that you verify that this information is correct. Now, if you're an intern, obviously you have to go a step further to get this signed off by your supervisor. Also, some LEAs and some non-public programs still want all of their service providers, even the fully licensed ones, to print off into SEDS. And that's fine. That is up to the LEA or the non-public. If they have that extra step required, then you do need to follow that. But for OSSE's purposes, as long as we see this document generated, that is good enough. Now a lot of you are asking, how often do I generate this document? Well, it is very common for us to see this generated once a month at the end of the month. This can show you any date range you want. You can put in, when you, as Rita showed you, when you generate this document, you put in the date range and then it just grabs every single log from that entire date range. You could generate a tracker after every single service log if you want to. Then you'd have a whole bunch of trackers for each service log, when in reality you could wait and generate a tracker like at the end of the week or at the end of the month. Here at OSSE, we require you to generate these service trackers no less than once a month, because it's on a monthly basis that we are going in and looking at some things like for Medicaid and public payment, things like that. Your school may require you to generate these more often than that, and that's fine too, but no less than once a month. You as the provider need to go in and generate this document. And it's easy to forget because you already did the service log, you log the service, you're like, oh good, one and done, moving on. And at the end of the month rolls around, it might not be on your radar. You need to put this on your radar. Because failure to generate the service tracker can get your leadership in big trouble, because then OSSE, a lot of OSSE staff have nothing to look at. They can't see those private service logs. Some people can, like your supervisors and people with certain access, can see each individual service log, but for the most part, a lot of OSSE staff and other people can only see PDF documents in a student's file. So they need to see this tracker document in the file. Hopefully I've convinced you of the importance of the service tracker.
That's a great point. So for some LEAs, they do require providers to sign an electronic signature form, and they will keep that on record. So whenever you're generating your service trackers, they already have your electronic signature, and there's no need to sign the form.
Yeah, and then somebody asked, after they sign it, do they have to upload it back into SEDS? So let's back up for a second. When you generate this in SEDS, when you create this document and you actually see this document in front of you, that means it is automatically in the student's SEDS file. You don't have to go save it anywhere. Just simply by the fact that you clicked Generate Service Tracker has put this PDF in the student's file. If you print it off and sign it, then you're going to have to use either a fax cover sheet or the scan and upload feature to upload that physically signed copy back into the student's document file. That is if your school requires you going that extra step to physically sign it, which OSSE does not require unless it's an intern assistant situation where you need supervisor signature, but your LEA or non-public may still require that hard copy signature.
Now, if you want to go back to view service trackers that you have generated, you do not have to go into each individual student's record in order to see the service tracker that was generated. From your own login, you can come to My Docs, and it will show you all of the documents that you have created for various students. So your service trackers that you have generated will be there. SEDS also allows you the ability to batch print these. If you wanted to print them out for your own records, you could batch print the document where you print all your service logs together at one time. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to talk about just quickly as we're starting to wind down, the other thing I wanted to talk about is the Smart Log Book, where we're talking about different ways for you to go in and view services that have been logged. So if you go to the Smart Log Book, it will actually show you the services that have been logged for a certain period of time. I just want to look at October. So I'm going to select October, and it will show you at the bottom of the screen how many students and how many logs I have for that time period. So you'll see Wendy comes up again, and then I can click on View Logs for that selected student. I hope everybody can see my screen because I'm going to talk about something that's really important. What happens when you make a mistake, even after the system has asked you to verify that what you're logging is correct, and you said, yes, this is right, log it, and you realize later on that you need to remove the service log. You need to request to have that removed. So if you see here, there is a checkbox where you can request removal of a service. And you click the checkbox and also click Request Removal, it will take you into a justification screen. So the LEA is going to want to know the reason that you are requesting them to remove this service log. I would like to state this. Only the LEA POC, the person at the LEA, is actually able to remove these logs. You can't do that. So you'll put here that, yes, I wish to request it to be removed. You will enter the reason. Okay. You'll enter the reason, and then you'll click Request Log Removal. Once you do that, this information now goes to a screen, a dashboard, that the person at the LEA that's responsible for removing these logs is able to see, and they will see that along with your reason for requesting the log be removed. Now, this is very important because if you're logging services and you're looking at your services completion number, and this training, although RSMR, the report, is outside the scope of today's training, I do want to mention that this does factor in that if you log services and that log needs to be deleted, it will change your service logging percentage. Okay, so just something for you to be aware of as you are verifying and making sure that you are logging for the correct student. Now, the last major thing I want to show you before we wrap up today's webinar is progress reports. So after you've done all this work, you've worked with the student throughout the year, now comes the time to do progress reports. The progress reports in SEDS correspond to the marking periods at the LEA. So when I click on the progress reporting wizard, I can click the drop down here. I can see the number of quarters. If the school is on a quarter system, I'll see that in the list. Or if it's a trimester for that particular school, I will see that as well. It'll already be in the list. Some schools have both, right? They have a trimester and quarters. So you will select the student that you're going to enter the progress report marks or information. I'm just going to do one, Wendy, and I'll click continue.
I'm going to do this for the first reporting period, and I will click continue. And then you get the progress reporting window. In the scenario that we have been showing in today's training, I have been acting as a speech language pathologist. So the area from the progress report that I'm going to be commenting on is communication speech language. I'll click the plus sign, and then it gives me information here to enter, to enter comments, progress. So I'll enter the progress status, and then I'll enter comments for the student in relation to the services and the annual goal. Okay, so you'll enter that information, and then you simply save it. Because related service providers do not act in the role of a case manager, you are not required to sign off on the progress report in order for them to finalize it. So you'll simply save your information, and then you can go to the next student. Okay, so that information would be there for that student. The case manager at the LEA is the person that finalizes all of the progress reports and distributes them to students. Okay, so that is your progress report functionality in SEDS. So we'll go ahead and take some additional questions.
Yep, that's right. Thank you, Rita, for showing us around in SEDS. We hope this training has been helpful to you as a service provider to help clear up some misunderstandings, clear up any misunderstandings about what to put in different boxes on the service log, clear up misunderstandings about what a log is compared to a service tracker. Those get confused all the time. Even here at OSSE, staff sometimes confuse a log versus a tracker. So hopefully we've been able to set the record straight today and help you understand why both of those are important forms of documentation. Someone did bring up questions about privacy. They're saying, what if I type in private information about the student in the comments box on the service log? That is totally fine. You are logged into your secure SEDS account, and only people with permission granted to see sensitive student records in SEDS for that particular student, only those people will be allowed to see that. And some teams here at OSSE have that access. For example, if they're looking at your service tracker for non-public payment or Medicaid billing, they will also see those comments that you put in the logs because they will print out on the tracker. But that's okay because they also have to have certain permission levels. So your student data, anything you're typing into SEDS while you're logged into SEDS is secure and private and will only be seen by other people who have permission to access that student's information. Someone's asking for a quick refresher on where you go to request to remove the service log. If you can show them.
Okay.
They blinked and they missed it.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to go.
Things are frozen.
Yeah, things are frozen.
Everything froze. They're frozen. Everything froze. Everything. Can you hear me now? 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 I should stop recording. If you're listening to this on the recording, I should stop, and it never happens. Listening to this on the recording. Oh, now they can hear me. Okay. We've had a little, our screen froze, and now I'm seeing all of your comments. You probably heard me this whole time. That's really embarrassing. All right. here we are. We're going to do a brief refresher. So Rita went to the, how did you get there again? You went to the, from the main menu bar. Where do you get?
I went to the Smart Log book.
Smart Log book, okay.
And then you want to pull up all the services that you have logged for a particular range. And I said I was going to just do this month, right? I have 2 logs in for this month. I'll click View those logs. And then if it were not already requested for removal, you'll have a little checkbox right here to check off, right? Okay, we'll have a little box to check off.
Okay, we'll have a little box to check off and to request
of the logs.
Wonderful, wonderful. We are going to have to wrap up in just 1 minute. We've got other good questions that coming in as well, which we can follow up with you on. But we want to show you the final slide. Oops, where did we go? I have, where's my last slide? I have, there we go. The last slide. So each of you is at a non-public school campus or an LEA school campus where you have a point of contact who is your liaison between you and us. Like if you have SEDS issues, if you have SEDS questions, should be going to LEA or not, and they have been trained and given resources to support you in helping you and training you on SEDS. And if they can't help you, then they are able to turn around and reach out to OSSE through the OSSE support tool or through their DAR liaison. And if they're through their DAR liaison, if you're an LEA, you have a DAR liaison. And if they can't help you, then they reach out to OSSE, and we help them. Then they reach out to OSSE, and we help them. The system is set up to try to build capacity at your campus. The system is set up to try to at your campus. So if you have any questions about SEDS, work with these people at your point of contact, at your non-public or your LEA. If you have general policy questions about SEDS, you should also reach out to these people for clarification on them. Like for example, year-round program. Reach out to these people because they can tell you not just what OSSE says, but also what that LEA has their own policies as well. Sometimes when an end user reaches out to OSSE and they skip over their leadership at their campus or their LEA, they miss important things that the LEA wants. So we got to wrap up. This recording will be online next week at the website I showed you. Thanks for joining us, and have a wonderful day.